In the early 1900s, the Kumaon hills of northern India were held hostage by a single animal. A Bengal tigress, driven across the border from Nepal, had claimed 436 human lives. The physical reality of this threat was absolute. Entire villages of 50 to 100 people spent their days huddled behind locked doors while the sun was still high in the sky. And the secondary effects were just as deadly. Because no one dared to enter the forests to collect firewood or walk into the open fields to harvest their crops, the local population was slowly starving. The presence of an apex man-eater strips away the illusion of modern civilization. It instantly forces a community back into dark corners, living under the ancient rule of tooth and claw. Tigers do not hunt humans out of malice. Instead of innate cruelty, the drive behind a man-eater is almost always a desperate biological necessity. This chart shows the mechanics of a typical ambush. A healthy tiger relies on explosive speed, sharp teeth, and hooked claws to bring down fast-moving prey. When a tiger suffers severe physical injuries, like broken canines or blunted claws, that natural strike fails. Driven by starvation, the injured predator is forced to adapt. It seeks out an alien, much slower food source in order to survive. By 1907, the government had exhausted its options. They turned to Jim Corbett, a local railway employee who understood the jungle better than anyone in the province. Corbett agreed to help, but he set two strict conditions. The government had to cancel all financial rewards for the tiger, and they had to withdraw all military forces and special hunting parties from the region. He needed an entirely clear operational zone. Uncoordinated soldiers firing blindly into the brush risked friendly fire, and Corbett refused to have his mission clouded by the stigma of reward hunting. Corbett traveled 15 miles east to the village of Champawat. He partnered with the local magistrate, the Tahsildar, and set up a base camp in an isolated dak bungalow surrounded by thick brush. Almost immediately, the Tahsildar had to leave to attend to urgent government business. Corbett was left entirely alone to inspect the bungalow's only water supply, a nearby irrigation spring. There, stamped into the mud around the water, he found fresh tracks. But the pug marks were strange. Corbett noted they looked quite different from any normal tiger tracks he had ever seen. To the locals, the beast was already a supernatural demon, and the physical evidence on the ground only amplified that dread. When you are completely isolated in a man-eater's domain, exhaustion and fear begin to blur the line between biology and folklore. The quiet of the following midday was shattered when a breathless villager arrived at the bungalow. The man-eater had just attacked, dragging a teenage girl into the valley. Corbett abandoned his investigation and immediately sprinted down the steep hillside, transitioning from passive tracking into an active, high-speed pursuit. He found the path the tiger took. Snagged on the sharp thorns of a blackthorn thicket were long strands of the girl's dark hair. Suddenly, Corbett heard footsteps behind him. A terrified local man, ordered by the Tahsildar to provide armed backup, was following him, wearing heavy, loud boots. Corbett stopped the man immediately. He ordered him to hide the boots under a bush and proceed completely barefoot. In thick brush against a predator that hunts by sound, silence is your only defense. A single snapping twig or a squeaking leather boot guarantees a lethal ambush. The tiger had retreated into a densely wooded gorge. It was too thick for one man to clear safely, so Corbett enlisted the Tahsildar to organize a massive human drive. It was an incredibly dangerous tactical maneuver. Hundreds of unarmed villagers lined the steep, forested hillside, shouting and beating drums to force an agitated apex predator toward a single rifle. The wall of noise worked. The Champawat man-eater stepped into the light, and Corbett took the shot. Corbett viewed the kill as a clinical necessity, the eradication of a biological anomaly to restore balance to the local ecosystem. The gathered crowds completely dismembered the tiger, taking pieces of bone and flesh to create protective courage charms for their children. In stark contrast to the violence, Corbett quietly collected the undigested remains of the final victim, eventually burying them in a sacred lake to ensure she received proper rites. At midnight, the surrounding hills were illuminated. Thousands of men lit pine torches, chanting and walking the mountain paths they had abandoned in terror. The shadow had finally lifted. For the first time in 4 years, the people of Kumaon could open their doors